It's election day in the UK. People there voting in a parliamentary poll that could be a game changer on Brexit. The latest from London with Clovis Casali in just a moment. Algeria voting today as well for president, an election bitterly opposed by protesters who say it's just another way of keeping the old regime in power. And day 8 of travel chaos for commuters in France as the strike against pension reform continues. The hardest line union here saying it's set to dig in its heels through the holidays. I'm Jeannie Godula in Paris. Thanks for joining us on France 24. Well, the UK is going to the polls today in what's been called the most important vote in a generation. This could solidify Conservative Boris Johnson's spot at Prime Minister, paving the way for Brexit, or if Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn wins, send Britain towards a new Brexit referendum. France 24's Clovis Casali is covering the voting today in London. He joins us now near a polling station. Clovis, this is the UK's third general election in almost 5 years. What is the feeling like there today?
Well, as you can see behind me, the polling stations are opened, and they opened at 7 o'clock this morning. This in order to allow voters, some 46 million voters in the UK invited to cast their ballot, in order for them to come before work, and some others will be able also to vote during the day, of course, and after work, given that the polling stations are staying open until 10 o'clock tonight. As you can see, possibly this is typically British weather, cold and rainy, but it's not preventing voters from heading to the polling stations across the United Kingdom. We spoke to some voters who explained to us why this election is so important. Take a listen.
All they're talking about is Brexit. Well, do you know what? We're all fed up of Brexit. There's more important things happening in this country, like hospital waiting times. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
There's a lot at stake. It's going to change the face of the country, and not for the better. So it doesn't look good for us, but have to remain positive.
I think there's a very particular choice that we have to make today between two very different philosophies, and I want to be part of that decision.
Clovis, we just heard one of those people there speaking a few moments ago who was saying that it's all about Brexit. She's fed up. There are other issues. Does that seem to be the general consensus? Are people fed up with Brexit?
Well, Brexit is definitely the issue at the heart of this election. It's the issue dividing society, dividing the country, dividing candidates, of course. It's where parties are positioning themselves, trying to win over voters. And until yesterday, until the very last moment, well, candidates were travelling across the country, trying to mobilise their electorate, try to win over undecided voters. You have 650 seats of parliament up for grabs. The magic number, of course, is 326. This for a party to win a majority and be able to rule the country freely, pass legislation in Parliament, and all parties, of course, are keen for that to happen. Another number also, you have 3,322 candidates standing all across the United Kingdom, and you've got Prime Minister Boris Johnson, of course, keen to win this election, secure a majority in order to get Brexit done, as he said, and of course other parties, some calling for a second referendum. All of these issues at the heart of the election. As we said earlier, polling stations are closing at 10 o'clock. We'll have results during the night, and tomorrow we'll get a clearer picture of who's won this election.
Clovis, thank you for that. Clovis Casali there reporting for us from outside a polling station in London. Another election for you now in Algeria in that much-delayed presidential vote. But that poll has been opposed already by a mass protest movement that wants to delay it completely until the entire ruling elite steps down. Protests already pushed out the longtime leader Abdelaziz Bouteflika and kicked off an anti-corruption campaign that led to the arrest of some of the highest-profile members of the Algerian establishment. Despite that, though, some in the streets say the probe needs to extend further to root out corruption within the entire political class. Fraser Jackson and Mariam Amalal report.
Two former prime ministers of President Bouteflika's regime are arrested less than 48 hours apart in June. Ahmed Ouyaya, in government since 2003, was prime minister of Algeria from 2017 to 2019, and Abdel Malik Sellal, prime minister from 2012 to 2014. The arrest signaled the start of the first anti-corruption campaign since the country's independence. The detention of these two pillars of the Bouteflika establishment shed some light on the extent of corruption during his 20 years in power. But the most notable figure is Saïd Bouteflika, younger brother and special advisor to the ousted president. Saïd has a very well-connected circle of friends. Among them, the powerful Kouninef brothers, owners of the QGC construction group, and Ali Haddad, also the head of his own empire. It's believed that companies related to these men were awarded lucrative government contracts. The companies were given a 30% advance on the projects, but they never got off the ground. They were also involved in several corruption cases. The first verdicts were passed down on Tuesday, just 2 days before the presidential election. The two former Prime Ministers Sellal and Ouyaya were sentenced to 12 and 15 years respectively for, among other things, secretive funding for President Bouteflika's fifth-term campaign. If successful, the plot would have cost the Treasury more than 830 million euros. As for Saïd Bouteflika, when called to testify as a witness, he refused to answer the judge's questions. He was found guilty of high treason by a military court and is currently serving 15 years in prison.
It's day 8 of the nationwide strike here in France. Most metros, trains and buses still shut down over government plans to reform the country's pension system. France's most hardline union, the CGT, is digging in its heels, though, saying there will be no break in the strikes, even over the holidays, unless the government backs down. The French Prime Minister says the new points-based system would be fairer and plug a gaping deficit in the pension budget. But unions aren't happy about the changes, including a plan to push the legal retirement age from 62 to 64. Ellen Gainsford explains.
Having laid its cards on the table, the French government is standing firm on its proposed pension reforms. Prime Minister Edouard Philippe has defended his plans, saying they're fair and needed to balance the books. But he also appeared to offer an olive branch to unions.
I am firm on the principle but not close-minded. And I indicated to the social and labor organizations that there were a series of points which we could improve upon. I take into account difficult working conditions. I take into account family rights.
The government wants to consolidate France's complex pension system, which currently has 42 options, into a universal, points-based plan. French unions have been striking in the week leading up to the announcement, and they're not happy now they've heard the proposal. The main point of contention remains the age of retirement.
The CFDT is against this economic measure. This technocratic accountancy means workers are considered as statistics. So the government must stop this reform, this money-saving measure to make people work longer from 2022.
The plan to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64 by 2027 has been opposed by unions across the board, even those considered to be more moderate. This means further strikes, with public transport set to remain paralysed across much of the country. The deadlock looks set to continue as the government refuses to buckle in the face of the protests.
Israel is set to hold an unprecedented third national election in less than a year. The date for that new vote was set just hours after the deadline to form a coalition government expired. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his main rival Benny Gantz have been incapable of getting a majority backing in parliament. Most polls say results from the new vote in March will not be that different from the one that led to the current stalemate. Now, all of this coming, of course, as Benjamin Netanyahu is barely clinging on to power in the face of current corruption charges against him. In India, police fired blanks into crowds today as thousands ignored a curfew in the northeast of the country. They were out for a new day of demonstrations against a controversial new measure on citizenship that fast-tracks citizenship applications from religious minorities from 3 neighboring countries, but not for Muslims. Many Islamic groups, the opposition and rights organizations say it's part of the Prime Minister's Hindu nationalist agenda to marginalize India's 200 million Muslims, something the Prime Minister denies. Shirley Sitbon explains.
India's new bill grants citizenship to refugees from minorities persecuted in neighboring Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Those countries have a Muslim majority, so the minorities cited are non-Muslim. But the ruling Hindu nationalist government says its bill does not discriminate against Muslims.
We're giving citizenship to those helpless refugees who've come here. How will this affect the Indian Muslims in any way?
This is the first time Indian legislation has been based on religion.
It violates the basic structure of the Constitution. It is divisive and exclusive. It has consequences that you can't even imagine. And this is part of your political strategy.
The Citizenship Amendment Bill has triggered protests among Muslims and also Eastern ethnic groups who fear it will lead to mass immigration.
If they want to settle down the people in on the basis of the benefits in the electoral benefits, then there will be a mass communal riots in the area of Assam and other area which the normal people will have to sacrifice their life.
Critics say the ruling Hindu party wants to integrate non-Muslims to widen its electoral base while diverting attention from the country's economic slowdown.
Rohingya refugees have accused the former Myanmar pro-democracy icon Aung San Suu Kyi of lying to the international court. Speaking there Wednesday, she denied that her country's armed forces were guilty of genocide against the Muslim minority group. An estimated 1 million Rohingya Muslims have fled Myanmar in the past 4 years due to persecution and violent attacks on their villages.
Aung San Suu Kyi's defense of Myanmar's army at the International Court of Justice was largely expected. But Rohingya refugees stranded in Bangladesh wanted to see it with their own eyes.
These are all lies. She is a liar. They killed our people.
These refugees fled Myanmar along with hundreds of thousands of others after their villages had been attacked. Independent UN reports document how Myanmar forces and local Buddhist militias torched homes, raped and killed thousands of Rohingya Muslims in a campaign of ethnic cleansing in 2017.
Terrorists entered our villages. Everything she said in court was a lie.
Suu Kyi admitted a number of incidents, but she blamed the violence on local insurgents, saying the deaths of civilians were an unfortunate consequence of their attacks. The Nobel Peace Prize laureate defended the army, which had held her under house arrest for some 15 years.
The army and the militia persecuted us. The government encouraged them to oppress us. We thought Suu Kyi would stand beside us, but unfortunately, she never protested against the attacks that made us flee to Bangladesh.
Suu Kyi said in court she would ensure the refugees' safe return, but Rohingya Muslims watching her said they won't return until the international community guaranteed their safety.
You are watching France 24. Don't go away. There's a lot more to come, and I'll be back in 15 minutes with more of your world news.
Join us on France 24 for an exclusive look inside the Libyan chaos. For more than 6 months now, a conflict has been rumbling on the outskirts of Tripoli. We'll take you alongside the militias fighting to defend the capital and out on patrol with the Libyan Coast Guard, bringing you an extremely rare insight into the plight of thousands of migrants who are caught trying to flee this conflict zone. That's on Reporters on France 24 and France24.com.
Reporters Plus on France 24 and France24.com.